who is one of our wonderful patient warrior advocates. And I would like to introduce Sara Batchelder. Sara was diagnosed with migraine 28 years ago at the age of only 22. She graduated from UC Santa Cruz. During her 20s and 30s, she worked on expanding her career while struggling with episodic migraines that were becoming more frequent and severe. After graduating with her MBA in 2004 from University of San Francisco, she started on her career track she was looking for and finally allowed a long-term relationship into her life. But a few years later, her migraine became chronic and daily. Her life started to slow down and contract. She has since lost 2 jobs and her relationship. Giving up was not an option. So after finding an incredible migraine community online, her online Migraine Buddies, she learned about patient advocacy, helping others, and most importantly, how to advocate for herself. She has tried over 80 treatments without much success, but she keeps trying anything new that comes her way. Sara continues to work in finance for a small architecture firm. She also is a patient advocate and volunteer with 2 blogs, one for migraine and one for celiac disease. Currently, her 10-year-old rescue boxer Bella and 5-month-old Chihuahua mix Whiskey fill her days with fun and love. She has participated in Miles for Migraine since 2013 and Headache on the Hill since 2015. She also is a member of Miles for Migraine Patient Warrior Board. I would like to welcome Sara, and I will now turn it over to you. Thanks so much for joining us, Sara.
Thanks, Katie. Appreciate it. Thanks, everyone, for being here this morning. Let me get my PowerPoint up and running here. Hopefully you all can see that. So on the right there, as Katie said, starting with my 2 reasons for getting up every morning, Bella, the boxer, and Whiskey, the Chihuahua mix, who I just rescued recently. So she's new and super fun. As Katie said, I was diagnosed in 1992 at the age of 22. And I feel really lucky, actually, because I had finished college that year. And I know a lot of people who started getting migraines in childhood. And even though I had some illnesses when I was a child, at least I didn't have migraine. And speaking of that, comorbidities, which, you know, is a statistical association of 2 distinct diseases in the same individual at a rate higher than expected by chance, which just means they don't really know why we have these diseases more often than other people when we have migraine. Some of them I have are celiac disease, Hashimoto's thyroiditis, sleep apnea, and some challenges with depression and anxiety. I always kind of wonder whether those 2 things come with all people that have chronic migraine or whether they came first. It's kind of a chicken and the egg kind of thing. But I did become chronic and daily over 10 years ago. And I did lose 2 jobs in my long-term relationship. And at that time, managing this disease became extremely overwhelming for me. I had tried over 80 treatments, including a nerve stimulator implant, which was extremely invasive. It was 4 surgeries over 5 months. It became infected with MRSA, and I actually was more sick after those surgeries than before. So something really had to give. And I really started looking at advocacy and the migraine community that entered my life, and really my online migraine buddies, some of which I believe are on this call today, literally saved my life around that time. And so I have been participating in Miles for Migraine since 2013, which is the picture on the bottom left there. And I have been participating in Headache on the Hill since 2015. And I'm actually wearing my new Headache on the Hill t-shirt today because I just really want to promote that organization. I'll talk about that a little later. My first year and my very first event I did in 2015 was going up to the Capitol building, going up these back stairs. It was a really weird experience, and meeting Senator Boxer, the picture on the bottom left there. And this wonderful woman, also to Barbara Boxer's left, I shared a cab home with her that day, and it turns out she's Eileen, and she's the founder of Miles for Migraine. So, you know, it's a small world, and I really enjoy getting to know Eileen and everybody that works for Miles for Migraine. So I'm no expert. I struggle with living my best life every minute of every day. But I really wanted to talk to you guys about some sort of concepts that I've been learning about and that have helped me in the last couple of years. The quote that I always say, somebody else probably said it before me, is the one thing we all have in common in the migraine community is that we're all totally different. So sometimes I don't like to tell people, oh, I tried magnesium and that worked for me, even though it does work for a lot of people, or, hey, try a chiropractor, something like that. All of those things are great tips and tools, and you can learn all about that on the internet. But what I want to talk about today is kind of some more abstract ideas. And at the risk of sounding like the self-help section of a bookstore, I want to explore happiness, acceptance, and observing our thoughts. So the first thing is happiness. I love this quote from Benjamin Franklin. The Constitution only guarantees the American people the right to pursue happiness. You have to catch it for yourself. So when they asked me to do this, and they said, the title is Living Your Best Life, the first thing I thought of was happiness. And I own a documentary called Happy, and I decided to watch that again. Basically what the documentary does is it interviews people he really wouldn't think are happy, but are really happy. And they also interviewed some people who actually work in happiness research, which is a thing. So one of the people they interviewed was this man who had a large family, lived in the slums of India, and his job all day long was to pull a rickshaw. His home was basically a hut with tarps as walls. And this guy was really happy. He loved his family, he loved his community, and he loved his job. And so it was just a really eye-opening thing to see that. Some of the researchers they talked to in this documentary, they said that happiness research focuses beyond the absence of illness, a life that flourishes with deep and genuine happiness. And, those of us who have chronic migraine, we may not have an absence of illness, but I think that these kinds of concepts are really interesting and may help us. For instance, people in the United States who make from $5,000 a year to $50,000 a year. Now that's a huge difference in their happiness. When you have your rent and your food covered, you are a happier person. But the interesting part is when you make $50,000 and above that, there's no difference in people's happiness. So basically, money doesn't make a difference. And the other thing the researcher says, 50% of our happiness is actually determined by our genes. So we have a genetic set point that really can't be changed. 10% is our circumstances, such as income, social status, where you live, age, and health, which is what we're talking about today. And again, those things are sort of not as easy to change. But 40% of our happiness is actually intentional behavior we can do to become a happier person. The things they talked about in the documentary were things like family, friends, nature, flow. People with intrinsic goals are happier, personal growth, relationships, community, as opposed to people with extrinsic goals, or things like status and money. So now I hear all you saying, including me, how can I worry about any of that stuff when I am in pain, right? And I agree 100%. Well, I still think there is something we can learn here. So remember that 40% is intentional behavior. So if we can just try to focus a tiny bit more every day, even if we're in pain, even if we're sick, on, maybe a family member, some friends, we can get out in nature. We can find some flow, which just means you kind of get to this really good place where you're working hard and really productive, doing whatever you're doing, volunteer work, whatever. Focus really on those intrinsic goals. I believe we can do this even with our health conditions, and I've been trying. I'm not always successful, but I try. And when I focus on raising money for Miles for Migraines, Miles for Migraine, it actually hits a lot of these areas, personal growth, relationships, community, my friends, my online migraine buddies. So this stuff really helped me a lot. The next concept I want to talk about is acceptance. And I don't think it means what a lot of people think it means. I stayed away from the concept for a long time because I thought it meant giving up. And I wanted to fight this disease with everything I had. Well, once I started actually thinking about it, it doesn't mean giving up. And I learned a lot about it as well through a concept called acceptance and commitment therapy. It's just another type of psychotherapy that people are kind of talking about nowadays. And it helps you to accept the difficulties that come with life and learn how to accept those things that are out of your control and commit to changing those things that can be changed. So for me, I really felt like it was time to think about migraine disease in a different way. And so what it meant to me is, instead of fighting the fact that I have migraine disease, I'm fighting how I treat it, how I manage it. So it actually means fighting my disease just in a different way. We're not giving up the fight here. There's no give up, there's no failure or anything like that. And again, when I had that nerve stimulator surgery failure, at that time, I had a lot of sort of bad things coming together, and I knew I just had to look at things differently. So, I wanted to free up some energy to focus on something different than just, why me? Why is this happening to me? Because basically I have migraine disease, and that's not going to change until somebody figures out a cure. So I can do things like family, friends, nature, flow. I can work on those intrinsic goals. And basically, I believe we all need something bigger than ourselves to believe in, kind of get out of our own issues and think about something else. And again, mild for migraine, headache on the hill, those are great ways to do that. And I also tend to be sort of a little bit obsessive about, about my migraine. So it just kind of gets me out of that. And I believe that language matters too. So instead of being like, I'm a migraine patient, I have this terrible disease, I'm a person first with migraine disease second. So again, focus on what I can do, not what I can't do. For me, I actually still work, and so that's something I can do. It's really, really hard, but I do it, and it feels great that I can do that still. I can live more in the moment, and again, not really fight all the time, fight the fact that I have this disease. I do little things like wear this t-shirt, maybe somebody will talk to me about it. Or, I have this necklace that one of my online migraine buddies actually made, and another one bought and sent to me as a gift. So I put little purple streaks in my hair to remind me of migraine awareness. And also when people come up to me and say, hey, I like your hair, what's the deal? I can talk to them about migraines. So little things make me happy. And I can free up time when, by using this acceptance, theory to do those little things. So the things that I also free up time for is better migraine management. So better relationships with my doctors. I created a document that is a migraine profile that goes through all those 80 treatments I've tried. So when I meet a new doctor, I can give them this really professional looking document and say, hey, by the way, these are all the things I've tried, because sometimes you don't have time to talk to them about all this stuff. And I also talk to them about my advocacy and my volunteer work in migraine, just to get them know, I'm really serious about trying to help myself. I can also do things like researching new treatments, like listen to today's talk and learn from these doctors who are amazing. I know a gal, Jamie Sanders, a lot of people know her, she's the migraine diva. She's come up with a binder that she brings when she goes into the emergency room. And she's really super organized and, shows the people this binder. And she feels like she gets better care when she does that. So things like that, if we can free up energy for that, it's really good in helping us managing our diseases. I research treatments all the time, and I hate to say, I don't have a headache specialist as a neurologist, but I do know more about the new treatments out there than my own neurologist at this point. So it helps me advocate, as long as I don't hold that over their head. Again, advocating for the migraine community, miles from migraine, Headache on the Hill, I definitely recommend. By the way, Headache on the Hill is doing a fundraiser. So if anybody wants, it's in like the next week. So if anybody's interested in that, please let me know. I also, acceptance helps me with realistic goals in my career and my social life. So I finally decided this is it. I have a limited capacity. My career is not what I wanted it to be. My social life isn't what I want it to be, but that's okay. And I'm okay with that now. And that's really helped me to focus on other things and not fight that. But remember, you know, acceptance is a journey. It's not a destination. I am not enlightened or in some place. I have days where I wake up and I'm like, why me? This is terrible. I don't want this anymore. So it's just something that we can think about and work on, and hopefully it helps us in some little way. So I'm going to move on to observing our thoughts. One thing my therapist reminded me of when I'm really, really hard on myself is, would you talk to your best friend in the same way you talk to yourself? So, you know, if you're having these days where I'm like, I am so worthless, I spend all this time on the couch, you know, well, no, you're not worthless. Yeah, you have to spend a lot of time on the couch, but don't talk to yourself that way, or try not to. Notice that thought and try to change it a little bit for yourself. Things don't change, such as having migraine disease, but our thoughts about them, they can change. So, you know, again, getting back to, would you talk to your best friend that way? Would you talk to your child that way? You know, if your child had a migraine disease, they were on the couch, would you go up to them and say, gosh, you're worthless? No, you would never do that. So don't talk to yourself that way either. So hobbies also help me with this kind of thing, kind of get me out of my head. So even if I'm having those thoughts, I can kind of put them aside and think about something else. So for me, I took up knitting again, like 5 years ago. Really helps me to do something kind of physical and just to really get out of my head about my migraines. There's a woman out there named Byron Katie, and I'm not trying to promote anything here. All this information is free on the internet, but she has this thing called the work. And basically you have a thought that's sort of bothering you, and you really start thinking about that thought and you analyze it. And by the end, you probably won't believe that thought is true anymore after going through this process. And I was really amazed that that actually worked for me for a few of my thoughts that I was really ruminating on. And some of the quotes about this kind of work is when she, you know, she believed her thoughts, she suffered. And when she didn't believe her thoughts, she didn't suffer. What had been causing her depression was not the world around her, but what she believed about the world around her. So, you know, it's getting back to not arguing with reality. When you argue with reality, you lose, but only 100% of the time. So, you know, we are people that live with migraine disease. That's not really your fight anymore if you come to accept it. Let's fight for other things. And reality is always kinder than the story we're believing about it. So sometimes I just even actually kid myself about reality. Not really a great way to go. And again, want to redirect that energy to something better. I was talking to my therapist, I think yesterday, about giving this talk, and she reminded me of a meditation called Leaves on the Stream. And this one really, really has helped me before. So as many people have done mindfulness or meditation, you know, you begin by bringing your focus to your breath. You start to notice these thoughts that are coming to your mind. You know, they could be good thoughts, they could be bad thoughts, whatever the thought is. You imagine putting those words onto a leaf and it floats down the stream. And you sort of watch it drift by. And then another thought will come up. And you sort of place that thought on the leaf, and then it also drifts by. So again, these are kind of abstract thoughts, but for me, doing this kind of work has really helped me to sort of be more positive about migraine. It opened me up to becoming an advocate, to meeting all these wonderful people online who've really changed my life. And so anyway, I'm kind of concluding here, but these three thoughts, these three issues, I hope they really help you in some little way. And just for fun, to finish off, I have a friend who told me this quote: "The problem is not the problem. The problem is your attitude about the problem." And he told me that Captain Jack Sparrow said this, and I didn't believe him. And I was like, there's no way. Such a profound thing, but it's actually true. But for me, I still like the quote, "But why is all the rum gone?" So I'll conclude with that. If anybody has any questions, thank you very much for listening.
Oh, Sarah, that was great. I think you gave us so much wisdom in your talk.
Thank you.
A lot to think about. And I love that leaf theory.
I love that one too.
I have a stream in my backyard. I think I'm going to go put all my thoughts on it and let them go.
Yes.
Great. Let me see. Let me look at the, oh, here I am again using the wrong mouse. 1 second. Oh. So do you have one thing that you try to do every day that just kind of makes you, when say you're having a really bad day, is there one thing that you do every day, just kind of to make you feel that you've accomplished something, in your thoughts, and just so you don't feel like migraine has taken your whole day?
Yeah, so two things. I mean, one thing is migraine related. I have, and this was something I didn't mention, but I have 2 migraine app logs that I use. And a lot of doctors do recommend we keep logs. Some people don't like to keep logs because it keeps them too focused on their migraine. And I totally get that too. For me, I'm a finance person. I love spreadsheets. I take these logs, I actually put them into spreadsheets to see what medications I'm taking every day, how many hours I work that day. I'm always trying to relate things so I can get some insight into my migraines. So for me, it's a positive experience to do that every day. I log everything, every single medication I take. For others, if it doesn't work for you, don't do it. One other thing I've been doing lately because of getting a new puppy is being outside more. I'm really, really lucky to have a very large yard, and I was taking her out to train her, of course, to do potty training all the time. And I was sitting out there and just really finally enjoying my yard more, being outside, getting fresh air, getting sunlight, being in nature. And it also really revitalized my hobby of gardening. So I'm not able to do a lot of gardening. I can't be outside, in the heat for very long at all. But I planted a couple plants the other day, and I get to look at them now when I'm out there with the dogs, and it makes me so happy.
That's great. I think, as I said when I introduced myself in my introduction, that I facilitate 2 support groups. And that's one of the things that I recommend to everybody. If you can just get outside for 5 minutes or 10 minutes and just take in the outside, look at the sky, look at the trees, just try to get outside for a few minutes, because I feel like people that have migraine, headache, disease, feel like they are inside all the time. And I said, do it all year long. It doesn't matter if there's snow. It doesn't matter. Sometimes it doesn't matter if it's raining. Take your umbrella, put on boots, and take a walk, and take in the outside.
Recently I realized that my favorite time of day is dusk, and I never related that to a migraine, but I know now that it's because the quality of the light is so different. So if you're stuck inside all day long, try to think about a time of day where maybe you could go outside and handle that light.
That's true. That's so true. Actually, that's usually when I walk my puppy too. Take him on his longest walk is like 7 o'clock.
Absolutely.
Yeah, is the evening. And that's true. The sun is kind of just down, and it's really pretty. Let me check. Does anybody else have any questions? I'm going to check. Helen did put on the website for the virtual event. Actually, I was going to mention in my closing as well. So that's on the chat. But you had such good wisdom in your speech and in your presentation. So thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Katie. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, you're very, very welcome. And